What new character class makes its first appearance in the Strategic Review number 4? We're going to cover that and everything else inside this issue on today's video. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer. This is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Today's video continues our look at the Strategic Review with issue number 4 from the winter of 1975. Hope you enjoyed the video. So the 4th issue of the Strategic Review is packed full of all kinds of good stuff. This is the size we're used to, right? Full-size paper. It's on the glossy printing, and this is done in a blue ink tint rather than black and white this time around. This one, as they note, is going to switch to being bi-monthly instead of quarterly with the next issue. And another big announcement that is in here, they've hired Tim Kask, and he's going to focus on publications, including the Strategic Review and other interesting news, as we'll see in just a minute. Gary Gygax, Brian Blume are listed here as editor and assistant editor, and now Mike Reese is listed as the AFV editor for this edition. So what's inside? We've got Gary's editorial and some TSR news on the front, mapping the dungeon, the Castles and Crusades report, an article to update some rules on Panzer Warfare, the Strategists Club, the Armory, wargaming world news, the new character class, which is the Illusionist, and it comes to us from Peter Aronson, so someone not from TSR. Tsolyani names from M.A.R. Barker. I probably am not even saying that correctly, but he's got this article on the language of the world of Empire of the Petal Throne. The creature feature, we get a new monster, a new magic item, and then an article from Brian Blume for connected to Boot Hill. I've already mentioned Gary, Brian, and Mike Reese, M.A.R. Barker, and Peter, who've made contributions. We also have a small contribution here from Steve Marsh, and then artwork from Mike Nelson and Mark Miller. Here's our front page. Again, has the TSR news and the mapping the dungeon on that one. And again, the big announcement, they're going to switch from being a quarterly newsletter or zine to monthly. Okay, so here's Gary's article. And he talks a little bit about all the things they're trying to do and mentions they are just really overwhelmed with all the tasks they have in front of them thanks to the great success they're having as a company, and they've had to add some new folks to the ranks. Tim Kask, as I mentioned, he's a periodicals editor. He's also just the general editor based on the things I've seen Tim talk about, his work on the early days. Terry Kuntz has been hired. He says he's working on something called the Robin Hood rules, which I don't remember having ever seen. He said they were shown at the Gen Con earlier this year, 1975, but I don't remember if I've ever seen or heard anyone talking about those rules. And maybe there's a trademark issue with getting those published. And he's also the service manager, and he does just about, like Gary says, everything that we need done around here. And he's also responsible for all future rules interpretations and answering questions about the rules. And then finally, Dave Arneson's coming down from St. Paul, Minnesota, and he said he'll be a regular staff and in charge of interfacing with our freelance designers, research, etc. And I've seen, I think John Peterson, maybe somebody make a comment about this line, crack, snap, work faster, Dave. Even there, I think you see there's some tension because Dave wasn't a grinder. He was a thinker, an idea kind of person, a creative person. And so I think Gary was constantly frustrated that Dave didn't like grind through rules with edits and stuff like that in the same way. He didn't work the same way Gary did, but you know, sometimes that's how good partnerships are made. Next issue, Tim Kask will be in charge of the Strategic Review and other things to come. And they also announced there will soon be miniatures for Empire of the Petal Throne. They haven't picked their manufacturer, but those are coming very soon. Then we have mapping the dungeon, and the first thing they want to tell you about are the minifigs sword and sorcery range of miniatures, and they tell you here what minifig to buy based on what they think would look best for different characters or regions of R.E. Howard's world. They mentioned the trip they made to Origins 1, and if you remember the history, this is where Gary debuts the original version of the Tomb of Horrors, his killer dungeon. And so he wants to know how people, he's asking for people that were there, maybe had feedback to share that with them. And then he also talks about all the material they've been getting from folks and this idea they had that they might publish a booklet of sort of alternate rules written by non-TSR people. That never happens, as you are probably aware, but that was something they've mentioned a couple of times that they were thinking about. Then they also announced a new convention, the DundraCon, and they call it the first annual convention for D&D. That is, because Gen Con's origins, right, are in wargaming. Origins is, while D&D was certainly a big thing, it wasn't really for D&D. It was all kinds of games, of which D&D was one. But out here in California, DundraCon, that's the focus. That's the reason they're doing it. Some magazines that they want to tell you about are fanzines as well. Alarms and Excursions, Cranor Rill. This guy, Greg Kostikian and Scott Rosenberg, are both mentioned that they're going to get something published soon. I think that's the Cosmic Balance in the Fantorgan Scrolls, if I'm remembering that correctly. He mentions Great Plains newsletter, Liaisons Dangereses. I can't speak French, so I'm probably mispronouncing that, but that's Lynn Lakofka's zine. And then he talks a little bit about Lou Pulsifer has a Dying Earth variant game that he's running, and Scott Rich has something he calls the Campaign, K-A-M, campaign game that connects to his zine, which is Rumor. And then they have a listing of different DMs if you want to get it, send your information in. Castle and Crusade, more on polearms. Gary loves this stuff, and I mentioned this in one of my fanzine videos about First Encounter, because Kelly Villamere loved doing similar articles. If you go look at those videos, you'll see what I'm talking about. All right, so follow up on the polearm discussion. He wants to give you a number of polearms and tell you what they could be connected for. They're basically similar enough. This is the polearm that I talked about that you should use for damage and weapon attacks and stuff like that. But what I really like is the one down here at the bottom, which is the Holy Water Sprinkler, which is this giant morning star, right? He talks about it can be short, but he's also seen drawings of it being something like 6 feet long, where the 2 feet of it's the metal part at the end. And this has if I understand it, it has holy water inside of it in the weapon part, so that when you hit someone, like undead, the holy water is going to come out, and then you've just put holes in that creature, right, with the spikes, and then the holy water can sort of soak into the creature. I think that's what it is. If it isn't, that's what it should be, because I think that would be a fantastic weapon to give you that bonus damage of the holy water on top of the impact of the weapon, right? It's very clever. And then finally over here, we've got the chainmail editions. This is what Steve Marsh has sent in. Some interesting, we'll call them Oriental Adventures weapons, right? Things from Asia. The Joe stick, the bow stick, in addition to the quarterstaff, and he's got some stats there for that as well. All right, so then Brian Blume's got some Panzer Warfare information. Here's some new types of infantry and tanks and different artillery that you can use in that game, as well as a nice little drawing there from Mike Nelson. More on the Strategists Club, and at long last, we have the winners, sort of a foregone conclusion in a couple categories. The awards that were given out at the banquet at Gen Con. He said 58 people, finding a bigger venue next time, so maybe there can be 80. Best new game of 1974, drum roll please, D&D. Outstanding game designer, another drum roll, who could it be? Gary and Dave. Outstanding writer, John Lundstrom. Outstanding Wargame Magazine, Wargamers Digest. And Best Miniature Figures, Custom Cast Fantastiques. He said, we didn't give out an award for the Best Sword and Sorcery novel because there was just too many things on the list, and no clear winner sort of emerged for that. An announcement at the bottom, the game Dungeon, ! is being produced. This is Dave McGarry's game, which is a board game with pieces and dice and cards, right? Fantastic game. I remember playing back when I was younger. Here's our armory. This is Tractics, weapon and vehicle gun changes. So these are just some rule amendments that they're putting out here in the newsletter. And here's this announcement: the dragon is coming. It all says the dragon is coming. We know, right, with hindsight, that that's their magazine. Wargaming World. Again, he talks about how good the time was at Origins with the dungeon that they ran there. Some upcoming events. There's a Citex Dippycon in Chicago that they went to. And he also says, hey, WinterCon is coming up in Detroit if someone wants to do that. It's kind of your last convention for the year. New game is coming out, maybe, called The Siege of Port Arthur, but only if it gets enough expressions of interest. And there's a new club out there called West Coast Gamers in San Francisco. Some new magazines he's received: The American Wargamer, El Conquistador has come back to life, and it's going to be printed again. The Space Gamer, the Games Letter, which is more broad than just role-playing, and then the Mixu Maxu Gazette is a Dipuzine he mentions out there, and then Jin Nun Gagap is being published up in New York. It's another Dipuzine. Here's their brief summary of Gen Con 8. They're glad it's in the books. They're already starting to plan Gen Con 9. And he says really Africa Corps and TSR's Dungeon were the big hits, new things this year at Gen Con that people were really interested in playing. Here's a new character class, the Illusionist, subclass of the Magic User. Again, just like in the AD&D First Edition Player's Handbook, intelligence and dexterity are required. You can see here their spells. They only go up to 5th level. Here's the shortened list of spells in the original character class, and then we also have some limitations, severe limitations on what Illusionists can use in terms of magic items. Okay, so here's an article I wish I could tackle better. This is M.A.R. Barker's discussion of Empire of the Petal Throne and his world he's created, and I think it's Tsolyani is how you say it. But this is a multi-page article to tell you how to create and pronounce names. He was all into this linguistic stuff. He's got the discussions of the dialects and who spoke it and how different people use different accents and everything. And it's several pages. And you get into this, I'll call it his alphabet, his writing. Like here's the visual way you write this language. So I have a lot of respect for it. I'm overwhelmed by it, if I'm being honest. It's super cool. This guy created his own language with his own writing. And if you're really into it and you want to get really into that world, then you got to learn this stuff too. And here's just a little piece of art. That's one of the creatures that's in that world. And then another announcement, the dragon is coming. This issue only has one new monster. It's the Clay Gollem. Lawful clerics, 15th level above, can create these things, only hit by blunt weapons. They have to be +1 or better. No effect from spells. Move Earth pushes them back. Disintegrate can keep them from moving. That's basically it. 12 hit dice. Attacks as a 12 hit dice Earth Elemental. And it's able to haste itself for 3 melee rounds after the first round of combat. 50 hit points. Pretty tough creature. I remember golems are much tougher than you might think. We have sort of, you could think of it as one or multiple. New magical item this time is the Ioun Stone, which they got from a book, I believe, by Jack Vance, if I'm remembering that correctly. And so here we have different colored stones, and these little stones, and you basically sort of like toss them up and they'll circle around you, if I understand that's how they work, and then they give you a bonus. And so there's different colors, shapes, and then uses. So spell abilities, better stats, absorb spells, let you go without food or water. It says repair. I think that means heal damage every turn, or stores additional spells for a magic user. Super cool, and a really high quality magic item that you'd love to get. Although I think it's a little obvious you have it, so people would probably try and take it from you if they ever saw one. Brian Blume has another article for Boot Hill, and this is basically an entire explanation about Doc Holliday, like sort of historical information about him, his life, and then they give you his stats here at the end. And no doubt about it, Doc Holliday was a fearsome gunslinger. Here's a little cartoon. This is by Mark Miller. This guy falls out of or goes through the door. There's no steps. He screams to himself, "Fly, fly!" Apparently, maybe it's a spell. I don't know what or maybe he's just hoping he could fly. He doesn't. He squashes. And then the guy appears at the door and says, "Hey, are you all right? I finally got the other door spiked, so we'll be safe." And of course, that guy's dead. A couple advertisements to mention. We have Diplomacy World Quarterly magazine or fanzine. And then a Game Designer Workshop is announcing its new game, On Guard. And finally, on the back cover, we have TSR's advertisement for what it has for sale. D&D, the first 2 supplements, right? Greyhawk and Blackmoor for sale there. Empire of the Petal Throne, War of Wizards, and Star Probe also for sale. And then some third-party games that are selling. So Strategic Review, number 4, full of really interesting information, insights, sort of seeing the evolution of the company as it begins to grow. We had employee number 1, Tim Kask, and I guess employee number 2 as well, which is Terry Kuntz, right? And new monsters, new character class, like all kinds of great stuff bubbling out from the pages of the Strategic Review. We got a couple more of these to do, as you probably know. So we hope you're enjoying this series. Hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope that you're subscribed. If you have friends who might enjoy, please send them our way because we're trying to build our subscriber base. Have a great day. Until next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.